Today, we are wrapping up our topic of unpacking the baggage in your marriage. In so many marriages, the things that we haven't dealt with will keep us from enjoying the joy and freedom that our marriage was meant for. So, we're dealing with those things now to get them out of the way and help you live freer, lighter, and with more joy in your marriage. So, Dr. Kim, as we're starting to end this series on baggage, will you briefly recap some of the types of baggage we've talked about?
Sure. We've talked about things that come from our family of origin, from our childhood, things that, sometimes I think we minimize the things that happened when we were young because we were young, but those things can last a lifetime, and certainly they can draw into your marriage and what you experience in your family of origin. We talked about finances, coming into the marriage after not handling finances well or having been hurt by someone with finances, and then you kind of are really cautious. Relationships, of course, past relationships. Maybe it was a divorce. Maybe it was someone cheated on you, or you cheated on somebody, or you've been mistreated in a relationship or marriage. So you've got all those trust issues that you can bring in. And then just emotional. Sometimes it's our guilt. Sometimes it's our regret. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's, I've got some people I've worked with a lot that don't want to experience pain again. And so it's hard to overcome that baggage to begin to trust and try to restore a relationship or be in a relationship. Self-criticism, PTSD, trauma, there's all kinds of things that can go into emotional baggage.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's quite a list there. I mean, I feel like that list, we've said this before, but with all the things we've talked about, there's kind of something for everyone there. It's going to be hard to make it through an entire lifetime without something.
I agree. And I think sometimes because we maybe sometimes look at the extreme cases when we hear about someone's baggage, but I think we all have some level of baggage. And depending on where we are in life and what who the people we're in life with, it depends on how it affects us. And sometimes it's probably minimal, and other times it can be really severe. But I think if we don't have some kind of baggage, maybe we lived in a cave our whole life, And then we probably have baggage from that. So.
Sure, yeah. It'd be awkward to come out of the cave if that's what you're used to.
Yes,
sure.
So
Yeah, that's good. And I want to refer back to something you said when we kicked off this series, Dr. Kim, which was that if you have this baggage, that doesn't define you. Jesus defines you, and what He can do for you defines you. So if you find yourself anywhere on that list, or you're ringing any bells right now, that's exactly what we're dealing with today. Because we're not saying, well, you got the baggage, sorry. We're saying, here's what we're going to tell you to do to start dealing with it. And so that was a great encouragement you gave us.
Yeah, I think it is. It's just, and to know that God always has an answer for us. There's always a way out. And there's a lot of comfort and peace that comes with that, and hope.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but I do also want to give the encouragement that there's a lot of hope, but it also does take work because you have to do things a little bit differently to get into a different situation than what you're used to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes we wish it would just come, or Jesus would just zap us and all that stuff's gone. But I think there's a purpose in us going through things. And sometimes as we go through it, like you said, it is hard. But I think when you get over the other side of it, you look back and you can realize, okay, God really did teach me some things through this. I have grown through this. And even to the point of being thankful for that because of who you are after you've come through that and the strength it gives you.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So I think one thing that I think can be surprising about dealing with marriage issues is it's easy to think of like, hey, we're going on this quest together. We're going to deal with our baggage and fight our dragons and stuff like that. But it really is the small moments. Like it's the little quick reactions. It's the habits. And so there was a Facebook Live recently you did with Chris and Jamie Bailey from Expedition Marriage where they kind of talked about when you get triggered by something your spouse has done and how when in those moments you react so quickly and so, maybe intensely, it's really not that interaction that brought all that up. It's something underlying. So will you kind of explain that concept of emotional rationalization and how that works?
Yeah, I think that, just relationship triggers or events can cause this emotional responses to the reactions, and then it impacts you, your spouse, those kind of things. They can be small things to big
Mhm.
conflicts, depending on the person, the relationship, those kind of things. So there's things like the pain of not being heard, pain of being betrayed, lied
Mhm.
to, criticized. Those are things that become sensitivities that we bring into our current relationships because of
Mhm.
things that happened, in the past. And so we become real in tune to those and others. Um, and it doesn't usually take a lot sometimes, depending on the severity, to connect it with this original betrayal and the cause
Mhm.
of action in the future. So we react the way we felt back here or experience it back here, and now we
Mm.
see it affecting us now in this situation. So something that can be just as simple maybe as a misunderstanding can have this
Mhm.
trigger a big overreaction because of
Mhm.
everything that goes into that, the moments behind that. And so your spouse is looking at you like, where is this coming from? Because
Mhm.
this, yeah, we did have a problem, but you're really reacting over. And so
Yeah.
a bit, so that can escalate. And so then maybe how does your spouse respond to that? And it just kind of escalates at that point. So I think that's kind of what Jamie and Chris were talking about, of just how
Mhm.
those things from the past affect us. And I think, just working with people, sometimes it's hard to, even when you're aware of it, sometimes it's hard to work through that,
Yeah.
just because it
Yeah.
involves risking again, being vulnerable
Mhm.
again, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think another piece of it, that one thing that's really hard for me is that it's such a habit. It's such a quick, all these things happen in your mind so quickly because it's going back to this initial feeling, this impulse you have of I'm not safe, I'm not being respected, I'm not being understood, whatever it is. For me, a lot of times I'm not being heard. That's something that really
Hmm.
bothers me. And the response comes so quickly that it's hard to stop it enough to say, wait a minute, that's not really what's going on here. It's just my response. So
Yeah,
if we're not sure what's underneath, or if it's just really a habit, how can we start to deal with it? Where would we start?
being aware of it is important. Like just being aware of it when you experience this trigger, and you just kind of, when it does happen, if you can just stop long enough to think, what am I thinking? What am I
Hmm.
feeling? Just to up for yourself, because sometimes we have some of those feelings and we almost judge ourselves. So what is
Yeah.
that? And so you want to become more of a clarity of what's happening, what's up in my mind, what's up in my body, because
Hmm.
a lot of times there'll be a physical response to that,
Hmm.
depending on what happened to you. I've had people tell me they even have fainted because of
Mm.
something that happened that took them way back to a trigger that was very painful for them.
Wow.
So just trying to get in touch with, because sometimes it's not real evident to you. You're maybe overreacting at what's going on with you and your spouse, and you may be
Hmm.
thinking, well, maybe I'm just tired or whatever, but it really could be linked to something from the past. I think learning how to back off from a situation so it doesn't escalate. Maybe when you get triggered, take a break. Say if you're talking to your spouse says something, that'd be a great place to take a time out where you could kind of
Hmm.
think, okay, they weren't being mean. They weren't, their tone of
Mm.
voice was matching up with their body language and stuff. Why did I feel that way? And so in
Mhm.
that time out, you can kind of think about that and pray about it. God, reveal, is there something here, God, that needs to be revealed? And if there is, reveal it. And if you just choose to
Mhm.
heal that, just please heal that. And so, and then I think to be honest with your spouse about it,
Mhm.
communicate. Hey, man, did you see how I reacted to that? Or I reacted, or I held back, but inside, this is what was going on. And so then they come alongside you. So then they can, all they may do is, and it's a lot, to pray for you, or maybe you just need them to be there and listen while you talk through things, or maybe they, come up with something, or say, I remember when this happened. Do you think that has anything to do with this? So you begin to
Mm.
involve your spouse. So you're working together to solve this issue. And then I think, obviously, if you feel like you're stuck and, man, this is happening. And I've had some people that, like, a trigger will happen, and then it hadn't happened maybe before in a long time, but then it begins to happen often. And
Hmm.
so trying to figure that out. So I think if you're trying to having trouble managing those, or you're trying to
Hmm.
figure out, okay, what is causing them, counseling would be a great place to find a Christian
Hmm.
counselor that's going to help you identify those things. And then not only help you identify them, give you a plan to how do we work through these? How do you get
Hmm.
so that this relationship that you're in now is really healthy, and you have
Hmm.
someone that really cares for you and loves you? How do you break that so that that doesn't continue to affect this relationship over here, so
Hmm.
it can be everything that God intends it to be? And so
Yeah.
it's all of those I think really help. It just takes time. I think
Hmm.
usually, I mean, God could heal it, like I said, but I think
Hmm.
sometimes it is working through that because we don't really know where the root is
Yeah.
originally in that. So you begin to work through those emotions, seek the support when you get it, having the support of going through it with your spouse,
Hmm.
helping them understand why you're reacting like you are, even though you may not know
Hmm.
exactly. Other than over, I know I'm overreacting in this, and then
Yeah.
finding a good Christian counselor that can help walk you through that. And whether you
Yeah.
go together or by yourself, leave that kind of up to the counselor. The counselor may think it's important for your spouse to be there for some sessions, to hear some things, to know some ways that they can help you. So that's a big step, but I think it can be a really important and beneficial step, because I think
Hmm.
anytime we address an issue and follow through with it, things are going to get better
Yeah. Yeah, that's really
eventually.
good. Yeah. Yeah, eventually. Yeah. I think there's a
Yep.
lot there. I want to highlight a couple things you said, because there was so much like actionable content in that. And one thing you said was talking about how when the moment of triggering happens, usually there's something that you feel in your body. That's something that you and Dr. Flanagan talked a lot about in last week's episode, where you talked about sort of recognizing those things. And I think that's a great thing. Can you describe some of the ways people might feel that escalation and realize that something bigger is going on?
We could go to anger. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a lot of times we go to anger when there really is something else there, because anger's safest. I think we
Mhm.
feel like we're pretty more in control when we're
Mhm.
angry, and so we may. So sometimes it's in counseling, we'll say, okay, what's behind the anger?
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of these triggers happen very quickly, and we
Mhm.
don't really realize it, and so all of a
Yeah.
sudden we're reacting. Um, but I think I see people that get that in, they get like pain in their chest. They may get
Mhm.
short of breath. I mean, you can get some of the panic anxiety symptoms that go
Mm.
along with it, just depending,
Mhm.
if it's been a trauma in your past that was really significant, maybe it was sexual abuse, something like that. I mean, there can be some
Mhm.
very strong emotions that can come along with
Mm.
that. And I think it's being aware when those come. And I think sometimes that's a key, that something's going on more than what's just happening between you and your
Mhm.
spouse. Because if
Mhm.
you're talking about, I don't know, where you're going to dinner or something, and that your spouse happens to mention a place where was
Mhm.
trauma happened for you in the past, well, we're talking about where we want to go to dinner, and you just fainted on me. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
being aware of those things, and there are different ways. I think it is being aware of your body. Uh,
Mhm.
Mine was always is in my stomach area. I can just feel it.
Mhm.
It tightens. It's like, oh my gosh, it just kind of it grabs me there. And I've
Mhm.
had people describe it in different ways. I had one guy that said, he starts getting a feeling in the back of his neck. He said
Mhm.
it begins to get kind of hot feeling. And so,
Mhm.
being aware of your body, I think, is important. God gave us a lot of signals that happen in our body. It's not just feeling that because that's who you are. God made you that way. And when something
Yeah.
goes on, I think we need to look at it and say, okay, God, what are you
Mhm.
trying to tell me here? What do you
Yeah.
want to do in my life right now? What do I need to
Mhm.
do to allow you to do that? Things like that.
That's so good. I feel like those are so good, because those, like for me, it's usually tightness in my chest. I start to feel this tightness, and then my shoulders get
Yeah.
kind of tight, and everything gets really tense in my body. And then it's almost perpetuating more of the feeling, because when you feel the emotion and then the body feeling plays along, it's escalating on its own, even without the more
Right.
external stimuli. So I know that it's really good to view that as a tool or a signal, instead of like you said, it's just how I am. No, that's a piece of information that can help you, because recognizing that
Yes.
before something comes out of your mouth will actually help you stop the habit of responding, which will help everything.
Yeah, and I think when you become aware of that, and then you can say, "Oh gosh, I need a time out right now," where you
Mhm.
can, and you may still obviously still that doesn't mean it's going to go away by the time
Mhm.
out, but it may help you kind of compose yourself, pray about it, and
Mhm.
then maybe come back to your spouse and say, "I want to talk about went on with me there,"
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
begin to
Yes.
again that process of working on it together with your spouse. Spouse can pray
Yeah.
with you, pray for you, listen, those things.
Yes, totally. And I think, I mean, it does take time because when you're kind of agitated, you can't really think clearly. So to be able to say, I need a minute,
Mhm.
I had to do this a lot with my kids when they were a little smaller. There was like this common parenting trigger that I bet a lot of people will relate to, which is you're trying to get out the door. So it's already
Yes.
stressful. You got little people everywhere and they just won't put their shoes on. They just won't do it. Or they just will like suddenly need, they remember they have to go to the bathroom or they lost their water bottle. Everything happens at this moment. You're already stressed because you're running behind. And so that would be a really easy time for me to snap at them. And I realized finally, like, that really what I was feeling was I felt unheard. I felt disrespected because I was disregarded when I would say things like, put your shoes on, grab your water bottle, and then repeatedly this wouldn't happen. And so I would get tense and get tenser
Yes.
because if I'm helping the little one put their shoes on, I can't also keep talking to the big one about it. So if they don't listen the first time, they do something random at that moment, it kind of throws off everything and creates more tension. But once I finally realized, because what I would go to in that moment is, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom. Why would I snap at my sweet little kids about this? They're just kids. But really, what's happening is I felt disrespected and disregarded 10 minutes before. And I just
Mhm.
pushed through. I pushed through because we got to get out the door. There wasn't time to deal with it. Where really, if I would start to catch it sooner and put myself in timeout for a minute, I would just literally kind of take a deep breath, walk in the other room, separate myself. And once I realized that there was something deeper, I could start to deal with it before it hit rather than snapping, feeling guilty, trying harder and just adding more pressure.
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good example, and I think we can all relate to that in one way or
Hmm.
the other of those times. And the fact that you're able to realize, okay, I've just been stuffing this for a while, and now I'm about to
Yeah.
go over the edge with it.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, but
Yep.
yeah, no, I think it's really good. A lady told me one time, I probably won't get it exactly right, but she's got 4 kids, was in the car with them, and it had been kind of one of those days, something. So she pulls over the car and she says, "Kids, don't worry, I'll be back in a minute." So she just got out of the car, sat on the hood for about 5 minutes, and got back in. But she said it kept me from
Yes.
screaming and yelling at them and saying things I didn't want to say. And I thought, well,
Yes.
that's probably was a really good solution for you at that time.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny, but so effective.
Yeah, it is. And I think sometimes, I don't know why, because I talk about all the time. We talk about it as a tool to use in marriage and conflict
Hmm.
and times like that. But then sometimes I don't take the time out when I need to take the time out. So I get
Hmm.
it. We know that
Hmm.
tool is there. We know it works. We know it makes a difference. I think it's
Hmm.
just making sure we do that when
Yeah.
we need to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we had to we had to work through in my marriage. I'm the one who always wants a little more time to process, and Brian's just so quick with, he can think of things in a no matter how much conflict there's, he's ready. He can still think clearly. I can't. And so we had to unpack the fact that I would say I need a timeout. And he thought, oh, she's trying to control me. She wants to stop me from talking, which I do want to break from his talking, but
Yeah.
but I'm asking for timeout because I need it. So I'm saying I am putting myself in timeout. I'm taking a timeout. It's not just to control you, but it's because I'm not going to respond well if we keep going. And so when we see it as like the personal agency instead of the control, that helps to neutralize the interspouse tension that comes with it
Hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah, that's really good. Because I think that's not uncommon, Lindsay. I hear that from so
Mm.
many couples, and I don't think it's male female. I've heard it go both
Mm-hmm.
ways. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just kind of a trait that one of us has, and the other doesn't. It seems like most couples fall into that. I'm sure there's
Mm-hmm.
exceptions, but I just hear that so much when we're talking about resolving conflict and counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand what your spouse needs, or they may need something different, and they're going to come back and talk about it after they've
Mm-hmm.
had that time out, then you get the point where you're saying, okay, I can wait a while. If
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help her or him, and that's going to help
Mm-hmm.
us resolve the issue we're going through, yeah, go take your time out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to end better for everyone, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of ways to start to stop our triggers when we feel them with our spouse, right? And so, kind of moving
Hmm.
on from those triggering moments, just to talk about the baggage of all sorts. Practically speaking, how can we start to unpack that, whether personally or within the marriage? Aside from these, triggering moments, what are some starting places we could start with?
Well, I think the first step in AA, everything is admit you've got a problem. So it's acknowledging that baggage is there. Just
Mm,
don't keep stuffing it down or covering up or hiding it. That there is baggage and it needs to be unpacked. And it could be, like we've talked, anything from past hurts to unresolved conflicts, maybe in your marriage, unmet expectations, or
mm-hmm,
even going back to family of origin stuff that we talked about. So I think acknowledging that is important, because at least that's your first step onto um, unpacking, doing the
mm-hmm,
things that need to happen. And then I think communicating. Part of that is really, I think, a key part of unpacking the baggage in your marriage. Have this open, honest conversation with your spouse about
mm-hmm,
the issues that you see that are reflecting the relationship. And then
mm-hmm,
listen to each other's perspective and work toward finding solutions together. One of the best gifts you can give your marriage is to learn to resolve conflict or differences together.
mm-hmm,
That puts you on a whole new level, I think, in your marriage. So it's worth working through to get to the point where and really, it's just being listening with empathy, and
mm-hmm,
really trying not just to let the other person talk, but okay, I do want to understand what you're saying. I want to see how that fits where I am. What that helps me understand a solution that maybe will work for both of us. So you kind of that
mm-hmm,
communication. And then, like we said before, counseling, if the baggage is really heavy, if you guys keep getting stuck, or every time you're trying to unpack the baggage, you get in a fight, try going to a Christian counselor that can provide this safe environment for you, that can be supportive of both of you, that can help you really explore what's going on, your feelings, patterns that you've gotten into, because we all get into those patterns, and then help you get some strategies, some tools to move forward, and finding a Christian counselor that not only will do all those things, that will pray with him for you, and that is
mm-hmm,
praying for your marriage, and maybe gives you some specifics that you guys can pray for together or separately to help work through these, because when you're dealing with baggage, it affects both of you. Um, and so I think it's important for both of you to realize we're both a part of the healing process
mm-hmm,
in this.
mm-hmm.
And then for forgiveness, I mean, I think that is, you just can't have a marriage without forgiveness. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine if Nancy couldn't forgive me of things, we we probably wouldn't have made it in a month. I mean, because we're gonna make
Mhm.
up, we're gonna mess up. So I think that whole part of forgiveness is a big part of unpacking your baggage, because it
Mhm.
allows you to let go of those past hurts or resentments, things that were in the past, and have a new beginning. I talk about that a lot with couple. Let's do a start over. Okay, we know what happened in the
Mm.
past. We've forgiven. We've gone through that
Mhm.
process. Now let's create something new, or let God create something new. And then, depending on the deal, though, I think it's always important to when you talk about forgiveness, to say it can take time. I mean,
Mhm.
God wants us to forgive, but the way we're wired, sometimes it's just making that choice. I am going to forgive, but I
Mhm.
need your help, God, in that process of forgiving. So, depending on the situation, it may take some time before you really feel like you're there. But as long as you don't get stuck, and as long as you're praying about it, and as long as you are letting God move you forward, then I think you're fine.
Mhm.
But it's going to take effort. It's going to take
Mhm.
commitment, but it's going to be worth it. And you've got to
Yeah.
forgive. You got to figure out how to forgive if you're going to stay in a
Mhm.
marriage, even a marriage where there's been infidelity. And even in that situation, maybe the marriage does end in divorce. You still got to forgive,
Mm.
as much for you as anything, because
Mhm.
as long as you don't forgive, I feel most of the time we're still giving that person power in our lives,
Mm.
because we're letting them take up space in our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts,
Mhm.
and so still giving them power. So forgiving, reconciling
Mhm.
in your marriage moving forward is such an important part. And then, what are the changes that need to be made? Um,
Mhm.
it's because sometimes we get in those patterns, and so we
Mhm.
One, we want to change those patterns, and two, how do we prevent these things from happening again? How do we,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we got in this thing, we created these problems. How do we keep this from happening? Maybe it's new boundaries, maybe it's new communication skills, maybe it's making lifestyle changes. Whatever it is, I think those are really important.
Mm. Okay, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring about forgiveness because I think sometimes we think that the person has to apologize in order for us to forgive them, and that's just not true. And I think that's probably the root of a lot of baggage we carry, whether we know it or not, because there's a lot of people in our lives who've been there at some point who are never going to apologize. They might not even still be living, and they could still have
Right.
that much sway over us because we have not forgiven and then continued the process of forgiving. I think that's one of the hardest things is it's really not one and done. Like you said, the way we're wired, we still have to continue to make that choice, and we really need God's help with that. Okay, so Dr. Kim, we've talked about some practical tools like the timeout, but are there any other practical first steps to breaking habits of how we react to our spouse?
I think obviously our thought life can play a
Mm,
significant thing in how we deal with these hurts or the baggage. If
hmm
we continue to have negative thoughts, we just kind of go over these negative emotions, we ruminate over all this kind of stuff, and we get stuck in that, whether it's pain. And then positive thoughts, on the other hand, can help us reframe the experience and move
mm,
forward. And I think that's such an important part, because if you're talking about things that have happened in this relationship or even in the past, I guess you've got to be able to certainly reframe your spouse and not put that baggage on them.
hmm
Or if you're going through forgiveness and healing, that takes place too. Um, so I think when we go back to those negative thoughts about those past things that have happened, those are going to trigger emotions, whether it's anger or sadness or anxiety or whatever it is.
hmm
And then once those triggered, that makes it a little harder to go past those, work through those, and move on. So a lot of times our thoughts reflect how we view ourselves, our spouse, maybe even the world around us. And so
mm,
all of a sudden our whole beliefs or self-destructive behavior that just kind of continues, and where positive
hmm
stops will help us reframe the experience, um, and really finding meaning in our pain. And maybe that sounds
mm,
hard, but I think that's, anything we go through, I think God brings something good out of it. So letting God work within the midst of that,
mm,
and bring healing in that, and what lessons could
mm,
we learn from it. And so I think that's kind of what you want to do, of letting go of the past, this emotional baggage, move forward. And so you've got a new sense of purpose. You've got a new sense of life, because you've been able to reframe those things, change those thoughts, get rid of the negative thoughts, and move forward. And I think we've probably all experienced times of negative thoughts, and we know what it
hmm
does to us. I mean, if I've got a negative thought, usually it's something that's going to make me upset or angry.
hmm
And so that doesn't do me a lot of good to just keep thinking about that and getting worked up and get angry. And then maybe I displace it. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with Nancy. Then I displace it on
hmm
her. And so it's just important to learn to, okay, I've got those negative thoughts for a reason.
hmm
Okay, what's the reason? What do I need to do? And how do I, and then going forward, how do I continue to have positive thoughts, reframe that person, reframe that situation in a way that brings healing and doesn't keep me stuck in these negative thoughts?
Mm. Gosh, that's so good. I think that's too what I think that's what the scripture is referring to when it talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And
Mm.
there are a lot of scriptures that talk about changing our mindset, taking our thoughts captive. So, can you give us any examples, just to put you on the spot, of how you could reframe? Because I love what you're talking about there, but let's make this more practical.
Well, I think, okay, let's talk that in a marriage situation. Say that you feel like, um, well, I know it's a great example. So that came to mind. So your spouse has been angry.
Mm,
And so you've got this pattern of anger, fights, anger, fights, anger, fights. So
mm,
your spouse says, I've got a problem here, and I'm going
mm,
to counseling, and I'm going to work this out. Maybe get an anger management group,
mm,
and they're working on it, but they're still not perfect. But you
mm,
continue to think this person's going to be angry. So then you continue to react as if that's still your reality, when actually
mm,
things have changed. And so the reframing part would be, say, yes, my spouse was an angry person. Yes, my spouse said and did some things that were horrible in our marriage. But my spouse has gotten help.
Mm.
I haven't seen them angry in 6 months. I've
Mm.
seen times they could be angry and they're not. So I'm going to reframe my spouse as someone I trust. I trust that that person has worked on their anger. I
Mm.
trust that God is working in their lives and they're in control of that. So when they do get angry, that means not get angry, that they come and talk to me about it, that we
Mm.
sit down together and talk about it, that it's not a blow up, it's not throwing things, it's not those things. And so I think it's just that whole reframing, and allows you, then once you reframe that, you don't have to be so defensive, you don't have to
Mhm.
protect yourself, and you
Mhm.
can begin to build trust again and embrace what God's done in your spouse's life. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
That's a great example. Yeah, totally. That's really good, and I love that too when you talked about reframing, because I think that our minds, like what we think of is what we see. So like if you think of and expect your spouse to be angry, you're going to notice it more. But if you expect your spouse not to
Yeah,
be perfect, but to be working on it, then you're going to notice that more, and that's a huge game changer in marriage.
absolutely. You've just kind of changed the filter that you
Mhm.
see your spouse through. You
Mhm.
change your lens in your eyes, however you want to put it. But yeah,
Mhm.
you're looking at this person, and then you can begin to really look at this person as the gift God gave you in marriage. This is
Mhm.
someone I did commit to live my life with. This is something we're going to make something beautiful out of this now. Those kind of
Mhm.
things can begin to happen.
Oh, that's so good. That's really good. So, going off of that, what are some of the changes that you see in couples when they are able to let go of the past?
It's really fun to see trust build,
Hmm.
where there hasn't been trust or there's been very little trust, because and then the more that trust builds, then you begin to see more connection in that couple because the walls are
Hmm.
coming down. You
Hmm.
see more intimacy, not just sexual, but in just the closeness in their
Hmm.
conversations, in the way they treat each other, how they're
Hmm.
kind to each other, how the non-physical touch, those kind of things begin to happen. And so yeah, it's really fun. I've told so many couples over the years that I wish I'd taken a picture of them the first day they came in, and the last day they came in. They don't even
Hmm.
look the same
Hmm.
because they're different people. There's joy in their
Hmm.
faces and their hearts, and they came in, and it's like sometimes I think they're going to break the ends of the couch off because they're trying to
Yeah.
get as far as part of each other as they can.
Yeah.
And then this last time, they're sitting so close together. I said we could put three other couples on the couch with you today. So those are fun things to see, and I think it tells me that God does work in those situations, that God does have an answer that we have not had on our own, and just
Hmm.
taking steps, letting Him involved, and doing the things that we've talked about today. Uh, just don't give up. Those kind of things can be overcome, and if it's not
Mm.
hasn't been an abusive situation, then hang in there and work through it with each other.
Mm. Hmm. That's so encouraging. I wish you had those pictures. That would be so cool to see.
I know. I keep saying that I just don't, because I guess because I think at the first week, they're just barely there anyway. And if I start
Yeah.
taking the picture, there he goes. He posting these on Facebook. What's he doing with
Yeah.
those? So
Be
maybe
great
I just need
testimonials.
a hidden camera or something. Yeah,
Not weird at
exactly,
all. Yeah. No,
exactly. Yeah,
it's true
don't be
too.
like this couple. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
We get to hear a lot of emails from couples too. We get to hear testimonials, but we also get like
Yes.
questions of people who are in a bad situation. So if we could just get the before and after for the same couples, because we get them all scattered, that'd be cool.
Yes. It is, and I love it when, especially with Thoughts of Marriage, because we answer every email, we
Hmm.
respond to people, we do things, send them things, do things to help them. It's just so cool when we do get something back from someone and let
Yeah.
us know that helped and that made a difference, and thanking us for praying for
Yeah.
them and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool too.
Yeah. The evidence is definitely there. That's awesome. Well, so as we're wrapping up this
Yes.
conversation, what final piece of advice would you give to our listeners today?
Yeah, I think this is probably a good topic that just maybe you just sit down with God sometime this week, um, just 15 minutes even, and just say, God, is there any baggage that I'm carrying that I'm not aware of? Is there anything that you would surface for me to work on that I know
Mm.
you're going to work on with me, and see what God does? And because I promise you, if and that's a little risky, I get to do that because
Mm.
if there is something, He's going to bring it up, but He's also going to have an answer for you, and your life's
Hmm.
going to be better because of that. And it's giving God, just inviting Him into to you, and say, what do you see there, God? It's a search my
Mm-hmm.
heart and know me prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and letting God reveal something and bring it to light and get you on a healing path. And that's pretty cool. And when you think about
Mm-hmm.
it, that this God who created this universe that we're living in cares enough to do that for you, that's pretty amazing too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really encouraging to end on. And that theme was a lot of the conversation with John and Stacey Eldridge too, about just that personal healing of Jesus to our own hearts. And so I do want to make sure that if you haven't listened to those episodes in this series, go back and listen to all of those. They're just the preceding episodes, and there was so much good stuff there. And really exactly what Dr. Kim just said. Just take that time with God and let Him heal you because He wants to.
Yeah, we have some great people on this month with us, Kelly
Yeah.
Flanagan and John and Stacey Aldridge. Interviewing them was so much fun. They're great people, and the things that they said. Yeah, I agree with you, Lindsay. If you haven't listened to them, go back and listen to them because they're amazing.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So, yeah, this series has been full of wisdom and lots of insight and practical help from our guests and from Dr. Kim. And so, we are praying that this series has been helpful for you and our marriage. And of course, you can always reach out to us. Like Dr. Kim just said, we do answer all of our emails. We get a lot of them. So, if you send one, we will be just add that to the pile and we'll get back to you because we love helping people and we get to hear from couples in all different stages and seasons and situations. And we've seen God do amazing things there. So later,
Mm-hmm.
we have an awesome bonus episode coming up with Eric and Erica Rivera of the Brook Church. They go in depth talking about Eric's new book, Unexpected Jesus, and how God's kindness met them in their hardest seasons. So go ahead and get in touch with us if there's anything you need. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.